right, welcome to part 3. So we're going to go ahead and add our Terra Sigillata. That is our colorant we're going to be using for this project. I'm trying to get the camera to focus on the jar so you know what it says or what I'm using. This is red Terra Sig. I can't get it to focus, so I'm doing my best. Make sure you give it a good shake before you open it or use it, because when it's sitting for a while, it's going to separate. And if you don't mix it up really well, what's going to happen is you're going to just get a big paintbrush full of water, because all the colorant's going to be at the bottom. So the history of Terra Sig is pretty cool. It's one of the earliest forms of, sealing and decorating pottery. Terra Sigillata stands for sealed earth, and a lot of cultures have their own version of this. One of the more famous ones that everybody can probably recognize just because of art history is going to be, Greek pottery, where they have those pots that are bright orange and bright black with the figures fighting on the front or just participating in daily life. For this project, we referenced Maria Martinez, who was a Native American artist, and she used Terra Sig, her own, indigenous recipe, and used it to decorate her pots. And like I said, it's across the board. We've all got different versions of the same thing. So sealed earth, and the reason it's sealed earth is because it creates a nice barrier between the outside elements and the inside of the pot. And historically, pottery has been used to hold things like grain and water and just keep things from pests. That's one of the biggest contributions pottery has given to the world. So that first coat of Terra Sig I put on was a red Terra Sig. The second coat, that is a black Terra Sig. Now it looks a little red if you just look at it straight, and that's because it's got something called Spanish iron oxide in it, and that's a pretty red colorant, but it's also got a mason stain called Black 6600, and there's enough of it in there that it's gonna be a really nice, rich black. So if you put it on your piece, don't fret, it'll turn that black color, and you don't have to worry about it being this red. So here at the studio, we've got 3 colorants for you to choose from. Well, really 4, but the 4th one's kind of, very similar to another. We've got black Terra Sig, we've got red Terra Sig, we've got white, and we've got buff. Buff is going to be sort of a toasty stone color, and it's pretty close in colorant to the white. So if you choose to do buff Terra Sig, it's not going to be terribly different from the white Terra Sig, because they're recipe-wise, they're almost the same. That red Terra Sig is basically the same formula, but liquefied as our clay body, so it will match the clay when it's fired. So keep that in mind when you're choosing your colors. The red Terra Sig is going to fire like a terracotta orange. The black is going to go toasty warm black. White is going to be white, and buff is going to be toasty stone. So think about that when you're planning your piece out and how you are choosing to decorate your pot. Welcome to the second half. This is how we're going to burnish our pots. Now, I've made 2 of the same pot. One's a little smaller. I thought this one would be easier to show you on. My pot is leather hard, so it's pretty solid. I can move it around. I'm not worried about squishing it or moving it. Notice how nice and smooth it is on the outside. This is going to make it easy for me to burnish and get a really nice sheen. So take notice of the sort of matte-ish texture we've got going on. So what I've got in here to burnish with are very simple tools. This is like a nice smooth river rock. You can steal those from a garden. That's some Vaseline. Now, you're going to need just a very little bit because we're going to rub it into the surface of our pot. You don't have to use Vaseline. You can really use any sort of thick, oily consistency thing. You can use coconut oil, you can use Crisco, you can use, heck, you can probably get some butter out of the fridge. Just as long as it's going to act like a little bit of a lubricant to our burnishing. I'm going to use Vaseline because that's what I've got on hand, and it doesn't need to be refrigerated. It's shelf stable. So once again, this is leather hard. You can do this when this is bone dry. Your piece will just be more fragile if we do it that way. So I'm going to do it here when it's leather hard, and I'm just going to take my Vaseline and I'm going to rub just a very little bit onto the surface because I don't want to really saturate it too much. I just want it to be nice and glossy and really get a good burnish going. Now, most of my openings are wide enough that I can slip my hand into. That way I can get a good feel for it. Basically, I'm just burnishing super simple. Put on your favorite movie, sit down for a while, and take your spoon or your river rock and just start rubbing the side of your pot. It's really more process oriented than it is technical. So the hard part of burnishing is just patience. Sitting there and doing the thing. That is literally the hardest part of burnishing. Knowing that you've got to sit down for, however long it takes to get that glossy sheen. And you'll kind of see it develop as I keep going, and I'll try to speed up the process here in a bit so you get a good idea of what burnishing looks like. And when you go in to use your Vaseline, only do one coat. If you keep adding it back on, thinking that the shininess of your Vaseline or your coconut oil or whatever is adding to the shininess of your pot, unfortunately, that's a little deceptive. So one coat of whatever lubricant you're going to use, no more. Don't add any extra, because what happens is if you put more Vaseline on top of the places you've already started burnishing, what ends up happening is it ruins your work. It undoes all the effort you've already put into it. So burnishing is really nice, and basically what we're doing is we're taking all those clay particles and we're forcing them to line up. We're making them glassy. We're going to lay them as flat and smooth as we possibly can. That's going to give it a really nice shiny surface the more we work it into. So you gotta keep going. And you might find yourself having to work on one specific section of pot for a while, and you're just going to do that all over the piece. And the more time you put into it, the more you burnish, the shinier it's going to get. For our project, I'm not looking for them to be super glassy because that sort of takes, in my opinion, like a lot of skill and patience. I'm just looking for y'all to get an idea of the technique and a shiny surface. So if you're at any point your arm is like, oh my gosh, I can't go anymore, take a break, set it aside for a minute and go back to it when you've rested. But end of the day, we're looking for a shiny, glossy surface, and you can kind of see how I'm getting that. Right now is a little too early on to really tell, and that's just because the Vaseline can be very misleading. Alright, so now we go into hyper speed. If only I could really burnish this quickly. I think I would get done really, really fast. So one of the reasons we're making round forms is because when we have sharp edges, like where the neck and the shoulders of this pot meet, sometimes it's hard to get that area completely glossy. You'll find that you're going to have trouble in those particular parts of your pot. So I've walked away to go get another thing that we can use for burnishing. If you don't have rocks at your home, never fear. You can use the back of a spoon, which is what I've got right here. So you just your regular kitchen spoon, and you can just hit it. It's shiny and smooth enough that it'll work. The one downside to the kitchen spoon is a lot of them have like a little bit of a sharp edge. So if you rush it too much, you might accidentally cut into the side of your pot, and you'll see me sort of do that. Now, I've also brought this sponge over, and you can kind of see me like every now and again wipe off the back of my spoon or the back of my rock, and that's just because I'm picking up a lot of the gunk and the Vaseline that I put on prior to that I'm using to lubricate my burnishing, and I just don't need that to stay on the pot. So I'm gonna go ahead and just whoop, wipe it off. Shiny, 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 shiny. We love a shiny pot. Now the trick is that you don't want to use too much pressure either on both of your hands, because if you push too hard in any one way, especially when your clay is as dry as this is, you might end up breaking your piece. So baby hands, I guess, is the idea. I'm just got enough pressure in my hands that I'm holding it still, but not so much that I have messed it up. Now you can see where all the effort that I put into that one side is really paying off, because on that other side that's sort of matte, there's such a big difference. So end of the day with this particular process, it's just time and patience. And like I said, you can, put on a podcast or throw on your favorite TV show, sit on the couch if you're at home, and just hold this in your hand, maybe on a towel, and just it's mindless. It's mindless, just burnish your life away. Like, definitely take a look at how very different that matte side is in comparison to the side that we burnished. And I'm using very, very little Vaseline, maybe just like a little dip. So Maria Martinez would use lard, and that's just because that's what they had on hand. It was readily available. It's what they used to cook with. So why not use it for pottery? So when she would burnish her pots were often bone dry, um, and the lard sort of gave it a little structural integrity, like those fat particles deposited themselves enough to really let the clay just activate on the surface and not all the way through. So when you get done burnishing and you're done doing your stenciling, you're done. That's it. Go ahead and throw that on the drying shelf. Out of sight, out of mind, if you will.